Okay. I think I could wait another 4 or 5 seconds before I have to, by statute, call the meeting to order. Call the meeting to order, Mr. Clarke.
Thank you, Your Worship. That'd be tough for me to explain. Our first item this evening is a presentation, and we're here to recognize BC Community Achievement Award recipients from the Coquitlam area, and that's Mr. Sandy Burpee and Mr. Reid Maxwell, and I would invite the Mayor to give some opening comments.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. We'd like to take a moment this evening, all of Council and all of our community here in Coquitlam, to discuss the BC Community Achievement Awards. These awards are handed out annually by the British Columbia Achievement Foundation, a foundation established and endowed by the provincial government to celebrate excellence in the arts, humanities, enterprise, and community service. As such, joining us tonight are our 3 provincial colleagues that share our community of Coquitlam: Douglas Horn, MLA for Coquitlam Burke Mountain; Linda Reamer, MLA for Port Moody Coquitlam; and Selena Robinson, MLA for Coquitlam Millardville, a riding that I know and I live in. The BC Community Achievement Awards celebrate British Columbians who go above and beyond in their dedication and service to others, and who devote time and energy to making their communities more caring, dynamic, beautiful, healthy, and unique. They inspire others by their example. This year, there were 34 recipients of this award honored at a ceremony at Government House in Victoria on April 24th. And we're extremely proud that 3 of these 34 came from right here in Coquitlam, and that 2 of them are here with us tonight. The third, Dr. Tom Rutledge, will be joining us at our first meeting in September. Wasn't able to make it tonight, but the other 2 are here with us tonight: Sandy Burpee and J. Reid Maxwell. I'd like to invite Sandy and J. Reid Maxwell to come to the front of the room, up to the podium there. There they are. And now I get to say nice things about you, and you're not allowed to blush. Sandy, of course, is known for his work on the Tri-Cities Homelessness and Housing Task Group. He has held this position for 9 years, and that's how I first met him. Just recently announced that he will not be resuming the role, he will not be continuing in the role at the end of this year. But he's also been involved with the local Restorative Justice Society, the Regional Housing Coalition, and the Sheriff Food Bank. He's been volunteering in the community for more than 20 years, tirelessly advocating for people who are vulnerable and at risk. And one role that actually isn't on this piece of paper, but he is an avid search and rescue volunteer for many years, and he's been out there. He's been out there searching and rescuing. J. Reid Maxwell is a teacher, adjudicator, and mentor. He is one of the top Scottish drummers in the world. And the lead, well, that's something to stand at attention for. Everybody please stand up. No? Okay. He's the lead drummer of the prestigious and award-winning Simon Fraser University Pipe Band. The SFU Pipe Band is known and recognized around the world as a center of excellence and a fierce competitor as well. And in fact, J. Reid Maxwell is the first person in history to lead the drum corps of 2 different bands to be named World Pipe Champions. And while he couldn't attend tonight, I'd also like to acknowledge Dr. Tom Rutledge. We'll speak more fully about his accomplishments when he joins us in September. I know we have some certificates from local MLAs. I know that at least one of our local MLAs actually was the nominator rather, for Sandy Burpee. Thank you, Selena. So I know that our provincial reps are very enthusiastic about you both and your achievements. And on behalf of Council, I want to thank you and congratulate you. And let's have a round of applause for these 2 outstanding. Yeah, we could have had pipes.
first Thursday? All day? Okay. Oh, that's right.
There we go. Maxwell. I don't actually get to present these because the original will present them. There you go. On behalf of the council, thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much. Well done. Thank you very much. I do want to invite our members of the Legislative Assembly to stay if they want to see efficient government in action. This is the level of government that's closest to the people, and it's great that our people's reps are able to join us tonight. Mr. Clerk.
You always throw out those lines and then toss it to me. It's tough. Our next item, item 2, is the 2015 Ipsos Reid survey results for Coquitlam. We have a presentation by Ipsos Reid Public Affairs, and I would invite Catherine Mouse to come forward at this time.
Well, thank you very much for inviting me here today to present the results of the city's 2015 Citizen Survey.
Thank you very much for coming.
Okay. My name is Catherine Knaus. I'm a director with Ipsos Reid. Ipsos Reid's been doing the city citizen survey for many years now, since 2003, and I myself have been involved with the survey for most of those years, and I see some familiar faces as I'm presenting to you tonight, so thank you very much. The focus of today's presentation will be on the overall results and some of the key findings coming out of the presentation, and a more detailed report has been made available to staff as well. First thing I wanted to touch on was the objectives and methodology, and the main objective was to conduct a statistically valid survey of residents to better understand opinions of the community, priority issues, and satisfaction with municipal services. The survey itself touches on a wide range of issues, and we'll get into some of those results as we go through, but it does look at perceptions of the community as a whole and then the performance of the city in certain areas as well. To do this, we did a telephone survey with a random and representative sample of 501 adult Coquitlam residents. We drew sample by postal code that was provided by staff at the city, and then we randomly selected from that. And we had quotas in place to make sure that we talked with a representative sample by certain demographics, so age, gender, and neighborhood in particular. And then we also weighted the data on the back end by those demographics to make sure they're reflective of the actual population in Coquitlam according to the most recent census data. The survey was conducted in April, between April 15th and 28th, which is generally consistent with the timing that we've used in previous years as well. And a sample size of 500 has a margin of error of plus or minus 4.4 percentage points 19 times out of 20. That's your overall margin of error. If you're looking at any subsample results, so by age or gender and neighborhood, the margin of error is going to be slightly larger for those, just simply because we're doing this subsample of residents. And where we could, we've compared this year's results to previous years to understand how attitudes and priorities are changing, assess some of the progress in addressing some of those key issues. And we've also compared this year's results to our normative database. We do a lot of work with other municipalities in BC, and we ask a lot of similar questions. So where we can, we've compared Coquitlam residents' perceptions of the city and your performance with those of residents living in other BC communities. And those are based on work we've done in the past 5 years. First thing I wanted to cover was the quality of life. And as you can see, nearly all residents, 98%, speak highly of the quality of life in Coquitlam. So that's 98% rating the quality of life as very good or good. And there's some intensity to that as well, with 51%. So half of residents rating the quality of life as very good. And overall, that points to quite a favorable view of the community as a whole. This is a really good 30,000 feet look at how residents feel about life in Coquitlam today. The tracking data, you can see where we've looked at the results over the years, so that's in the table at the bottom of the chart. It goes back to 2003. And if you look at this year's results, 2015, which is at the far right, to 2013, they're not really significantly different between the 2 years. But if you go further back in time, you can see that there has been a significant movement in the percentage rating the quality of life as very good. So if you look at 2006, that was 25%, and then now, 10 years later, we're double that at 51%. So that certainly is encouraging to see, particularly when you keep in mind that 98%, there's really no further up you can go in that measure. So if citizens are going to say that they're more satisfied with the quality of life, it is in that very good measure that we'd want to see, and this certainly indicates that that has been the case. Oh, one more thing on this slide is just with the BC norm on the right-hand side there. You can see that overall Coquitlam residents are on par with what we see in other communities, but the intensity is higher in Coquitlam. So we have 51% very good in Coquitlam, 44% is the norm. So overall, another very good finding for the city. We also asked residents how they felt the quality of life had changed in the past 5 years, and this shows that not only do they speak highly of the overall quality of life, but they're also quite optimistic in the direction that it's taking. So when we asked how the quality of life had changed, 52% say it stayed the same, but more tellingly, 28% say it's improved, 18% say it's worsened, and that gives you a net score of plus 10 percentage points, which does speak to some positive momentum in the direction that quality of life is taking. This has been the case for the past few years. If you look at the net score at the bottom there, it was plus 12 in 2013, plus 10 this year, no significant difference. So that positive momentum has continued over the past few years. And if you look at the BC norm, again, we're seeing more positive results in Coquitlam than we see elsewhere. So elsewhere there's some positive momentum at plus 4, but that's not to the extent that we're seeing in Coquitlam. This year's survey included a new question asking about specific actions the city could take to improve the quality of life in Coquitlam, and this is an open-ended question, so citizens are free to say whatever they'd want to say. We don't prompt them in any way, and then we code their verbatim responses into these broader categories. And a few things I'd like to point out on this slide is that first, nearly 3 in 10 declined to offer any specific suggestions. So that's 22% saying none, nothing, and 6% saying don't know, which to me indicates there's nearly 3 in 10 residents who really can't think of anything pressing that's absent from the city that would improve the quality of life. The other thing that I would like to point out is that when you look at the actual mentions that are included, there's not one single thing that stands out, but there certainly are some themes that stand out, and one of those would be transportation. So 9% saying improved transit, public transportation, 7% say improved traffic congestion or flow, and then 6% suggest improving transportation infrastructure or roads. And transportation is certainly a consistent theme as we go through the survey. It has been in past years as well. The other theme that stood out for me this year was around parks and recreation. So you have 7% saying improve, expand recreation facilities and services, and then another 7% saying more parks or green space would be a way to improve the quality of life. So while citizens certainly have positive things to say about the quality of life, that's not to say there's issues that they would like to see get more attention. And this was the first question that we asked in the survey. And again, it's an open-ended question, so citizens are free to say whatever they'd like to say, and then we've coded their responses up into these broad nets. So this gives you an indication of those top-of-mind issues. They're probably the ones you're hearing about from your citizens when they come speak with you. It's those ones that they're really on the top of mind. What comes up on top is transportation at 39%, mentioned that as the most important issue facing the city, and that includes a number of different issues. It includes just general transportation concerns, mentions around the quality or the level of public transit, traffic congestion, the condition of streets and roads, specific mentions of the SkyTrain or Evergreen Line, and parking as well. So those are all those transportation-related mentions that comprise that transportation net. And you can see it really is the #1 issue in Coquitlam. Everything else is a distant second. If you look at the tracking data for the presentation, I've only included 2013, but you can see it's really no different from what we saw in 2013. Transportation was the #1 issue then. It's the #1 issue this year. It's also the #1 issue in BC, but not to the extent that we're seeing in Coquitlam. So at 29% with the BC norm, it's the #1 issue, but that's still 10 percentage points lower than what we're seeing in Coquitlam. We know that transportation is a pressing issue in Coquitlam, so this year's survey included a couple more questions to delve deeper into that. The first was an open-ended question, getting residents to offer their thoughts on the biggest transportation issue facing the city today. And there's a number of issues that come up. The quality level of public transportation at 37%. Another 14% specifically point to the Evergreen Line SkyTrain. And then there's a few issues around roads. So the traffic congestion on the roads, 28%, and the condition of roads at 13% as well. I don't have normative data for this, but if you look at the 2013 top mentions, we're seeing the same general themes come out there as well. Another question we asked around transportation was, in this case, we asked about their specific feedback on transportation priorities. So for each of these items along the left-hand side of the chart, we asked how important is that to citizens on a scale of very important, somewhat important, not very important, and not at all important. And this chart showed you the total importance. So the dark blue bars are the percentage saying very important, the light blue is the somewhat important, and the percentage at the end is the total importance assigned to that attribute. So you can see a number of things come out here. It's roads, so upgrading the condition of roads through repaving at 89%. I'm going to skip pedestrian facilities for a second, but increasing capacity of roads was 83%, so those are those two roads issues. And then promoting public transit and improving public transit infrastructure were also important to the majority of residents. Improving pedestrian facilities I thought was interesting because that didn't come up as a top of mind transportation issue. It's certainly not something they thought of on an open-ended basis, but when we specifically asked residents about it, it certainly is something that they feel is important. It comes up as 86% important, and 50% say that's actually very important. And in comparison to those, slightly less emphasis is put on promoting trip reduction programs and expanding bicycle facilities, but still those are important to the majority of residents. And if you look at the tracking data, no real change from 2013, and there's no normative data for this question. Moving on to city services, first look at overall satisfaction with city services, and you can see 96% of citizens are satisfied with the overall level and quality of services, so quite positive and suggests you're on the right track with your service delivery. 39% are very satisfied, 57% somewhat satisfied. Tracking data shows citizens have consistently been satisfied with the quality of services in Coquitlam, and this year's results are not significantly different from 2013, so while you may be looking at the very satisfied there and saying, well, it's gone from 44% to 39%. That's not a significant difference this year. So for all intents and purposes, it's the same as what we've seen in the past. And if you look at the normative result to the right, satisfaction with city services is actually higher in Coquitlam than we've seen elsewhere. We also looked at satisfaction with specific city services, and you can see, and again, this was rated on a 4-point scale of very satisfied, somewhat satisfied, not very, or not at all satisfied, and this graph shows you the percentage who are satisfied. Overall, if you look at the combined satisfaction, citizens are satisfied with all of the services included in the survey, with virtually all saying they're satisfied with services such as public works and parks and trails. I won't go through all of these, but even neighborhood planning at 77%, it might be the least satisfactory of the ones that we've tested, but that's still more than 3/4 of your residents saying they're satisfied with that service. You get a little bit more information when you look at the percent saying very satisfied. In this case, what comes up on top is fire services at 75% and public works at 68%. Neighborhood planning, then you can see is quite a bit lower than at 17% very satisfied with neighborhood planning. Comparisons to 2013, for the most part, they're consistent with what we've seen 2 years ago. The one area that has gone down is recycling and garbage services. So that moved from 92% satisfied in 2013 to 88% satisfied this year. If you look at the normative comparisons, for the most part, Coquitlam residents are, their satisfaction is on par or even higher than what we've seen in other communities. Moving on to financial planning, the first one I want to look at is value for taxes. 88% of citizens say they receive good value for their taxes. The intensity is a little bit lower here, with 22% saying very good value, but that's not unusual. If you look at the norm, you're actually doing better than the norm overall and in intensity as well. So another positive finding for Coquitlam. Value for taxes has stayed relatively same over the past few years, and there's no significant differences this year as compared to 2013. We also asked residents if they were forced to choose, would they prefer an increase in taxes or a reduction in services? Obviously, no one would prefer either of those things, but the reality is that sometimes that's what it is. So if that's the case, we have 53% of citizens saying increased taxes, 1/3, 34% saying cut services. So clearly there's some direction for the direction that they would like you to take. Of the 53% saying increased taxes, it's 23% saying increased taxes to enhance or expand services, taxes, 30% saying increased taxes to maintain services at current levels. The reduction in services is really about maintaining the current tax level at 27%. Only 8% say they really want a tax reduction to reduce, a service reduction to reduce taxes. So that's what these results are looking at this year. And I think what's also interesting is if you look at the tracking data, in 2013, opinion was a little bit more split on the direction that they would like the city to take. It was more equally divided, whereas this year there's quite a bit more of a gap between those two preferences and a bit more clear in direction as to where they would like you to go. And the BC norm, a little bit higher for increased taxes in Coquitlam as what we've seen in the norm as well. This year's survey included one question around parks, recreation, and culture to help with the master planning for this area, and we asked about the importance of different attributes or different services when it comes to parks, recreation, and culture. And we asked each of these services and then asked them to rate how important they are on a scale of very, somewhat, not very, or not at all important. This chart shows the overall importance as well as the intensity of importance. And if you look at both of those ratings, what comes up on top is community centers, including senior and youth facilities, with 95% of citizens saying that's important, 60% saying it's very important, and neighborhood parks, including playgrounds and community gardens, are the two that come out on top there. Community engagement and customer service. We asked a few questions around here. I'm going to talk about a couple of them, but the first one was gauging interest in participating in different forms of public consultation. Many municipalities are looking at ways that can get out and engage citizens and grow that public consultation, and what are some of the best methods for doing that. And what this chart shows is that there's moderate interest in doing this. So of the ones we tested, feedback forms on the city website, 68% say they're interested in that. Public open houses, 66%, surveys like this, 65%, and community workshops, 59%, and then small community focus groups at 52%. The other ones are less interesting. You get fewer than half saying they participate in these, with mail-in workbooks, the city's Facebook or Twitter page, and online blogs or discussion forums. The other thing I should point out here is that there's not that much intensity up to the interest of these things. So you don't get a lot of people saying they're very interested. So who actually comes out and chooses to participate in these things? I wouldn't say you're going to get 68% taking part in feedback forms on the website. I'm going to say it's going to be closer to that very interested, the 20%. That's probably what you're looking at right there, maybe a little bit higher. But even if it's on a topic of them interest, it's going to be a challenge to get some people to come out and take part in these things. We also asked about satisfaction with customer service. So among those who had contacted or dealt with the city in the past 12 months, 87% are satisfied with the service they received overall, 42% saying they're very satisfied. And there's also satisfaction with a lot of different elements of service. So 93% satisfied with courteous of staff. All of these are satisfactory. Even with ability to resolve issue might be at the bottom of the chart, but that's still 8 in 10 residents saying they're satisfied with that. So very encouraging to see. Compared to 2013, no real difference in the overall service received, but we have seen drops in satisfaction with staff knowledge and the ease of reaching staff. So those two have gone down. But this year's results are still on par with what we're seeing in other communities overall. So that's still a positive finding to note. Lastly, we asked a couple questions around work. Of the survey respondents this year, 60% are employed. That includes 40% who are employed full-time, 16% who are employed part-time. That's consistent with 2013. Among those who are employed or students, we asked, is your employment or school based in Coquitlam, based in a neighboring municipality, Vancouver, or elsewhere in the Lower Mainland? This year you get 31% saying they're based in Coquitlam. It was 23% in 2013, but it was 30% in 2012. So we're back up to what we saw in 2012 this year. So in summary, just a few last points. Overall, citizens demonstrate predominantly positive views of the community and city. 98% are satisfied with the quality of life, 96% satisfied with the quality of services. So it really does suggest you're on the right track. Transportation dominates the public issue agenda. On a top-of-mind basis, it comes up more than 3 times as often as any of the other issues that citizens mention, and includes a number of different things, but there are a few themes that come out. So public transportation and traffic congestion, condition of roads are what we're seeing. And then, like I said, while it might not be a top-of-mind concern, pedestrian facilities is still an important priority for citizens. Majority of residents say they receive good value for their taxes, and they would rather pay increased taxes than see existing services cut, which speaks to how highly they do value their services. They don't want to see them reduced. Community centers and neighborhood parks top citizens' list of priorities for parks, recreation, and culture. And in the majority of areas, scores in Coquitlam are higher than the norm, and I think that's a really noteworthy finding to point out when we look at how you're doing compared to other BC communities, really stand out in a number of different areas. That's the end of my presentation, and happy to answer any questions.
Well, thank you. Given the amount of material that you've presented to us, I'm sure there will be questions. I have some, but I'm going to defer to the list here. I've got Councillor O'Neill.
Thank you very much, and yet again, very encouraging results, but they still point to some areas that we could take a closer look at. First, an observation, like when we get numbers of 98% satisfied or very satisfied with quality of life and 96% with services, I mean, it doesn't get much better than that. I was interested to know, does your firm look at, I know you compare us to Metro Vancouver and provincially perhaps, but nationally, internationally at all? I found a similar survey by the European Union, but it's not exactly the same. Yeah. Have you?
I could provide you Canadian norms because we do quite a bit of work across Canada. So certainly if you're interested in seeing what the Canadian norm is, I could go back and dig a little bit and see what we can find there. I'm not too sure what I could provide internationally, but certainly nationally something.
Is generally across Canada, is everybody over 80, 85%? Or there are some people that are, some communities that really are struggling?
For quality of life, it does tend to be higher, but I mean, I have seen them in the 80% range at times, so it's not always a ringing endorsement of the community. You do see some variation in that. So
it's just not an automatic, polite Canadian thing to do to say yes, and you're going to get 95% anywhere.
No, and I think that's why it's important to look at the difference in the vary and the overall as well, because you will get some more variation.
Right, so it's earned. And by the way, the European Union asked, are you satisfied with where you live? And there are obviously some places you'd like to visit but not live. Naples got 65% only, and the worst of the 79 cities was Athens, 52%. Beautiful place to visit, but I guess you wouldn't want to live there. Got a few other questions here. So on Slide 13, satisfaction with specific city services. I don't know if you can get back to that. And this is something that Council might want to pay extra attention to because our booklet didn't have the same figures that the slide had. And I actually had looked up these figures because the 2013 comparison is not in the booklet that we got. And so you might have missed this in going through the report, but in every one of these 2013 to 2014 comparisons, where we are now is either the same or less. So even though it's plus or minus, it's probably all really high. To me, I'm seeing that everything is a little less or the same. Nothing has gotten better between 2013 and 2014. And your figures for 2013 are the same ones that I ended up looking up as well. Now, is that significant, or am I reading too much into that everything either stays the same or has gotten a little worse?
So the only one where there's a significant difference is the recycling and garbage services. So that has gone down, and the other ones, while there might be minor variations from a statistical standpoint, they're not different.
So it's the same. Okay. Well, that's good to know then. But in garbage, we went through a major change in garbage and recycling as well. So there's always some teething problems with that. The other point that I have in terms of slide 10, it's page, don't know the page number in our booklet, it's 34 in our booklet, is about transportation priorities. Do you know, do our priorities pretty well stack up with the same priorities in, say, Vancouver or Abbotsford or something like that? Or people generally look at the paving, the public transit and things like that, and have a lower priority for bicycle paths and things like that? Is that unique to us?
It's difficult to say because this question is unique to you. So this isn't one I can provide normative comparisons for. I'm just trying to think back to the top of mind issues. When transportation does come up in other communities, it does tend to focus on roads and public transportation, but to put a number figure on it and say how these results compare to, say, Vancouver or other communities, I really can't say.
Yeah, and I asked the question because every year when this particular page comes up, the bicycle facilities and bike lanes and pathways and everything is always at the bottom of this list, and I think it's, even though I'm a very ardent recreational bicyclist, I recognize the fact that for our citizens, the pavement and public transit are really the big issues.
Yeah. I mean, I can't say. I know I did a survey in Kelowna earlier this year, and it wasn't this exact question, but we looked at some transportation priorities overall, and there was less emphasis placed on bicycle infrastructure that year as compared to previous years as well. So that's just one city and one example, but it's the only one that comes to mind at this time.
Good. Thank you very much. That's all my questions.
Yeah, actually, on that last point, I found the number actually to be comfortably high. Given that I suspect the vast majority of residents don't consider themselves to be affected by bike infrastructure because they don't cycle. And yet 58%, the majority here, said that improving those pieces of infrastructure may well be important. And I looked to the question 2 above that, or the response 2 above that, increasing capacity of roads, which of course improving bicycle infrastructure does improve capacity of roads, and there may be some people that grasp that connection, and while they find capacity of roads to be an issue, cycling infrastructure is one way of addressing it. And so maybe that's, I'm fascinated always by the crosstab. Any other questions from council? No. Fascinating bunch of information. We're going to pour through it undoubtedly. Thank you very much for coming out.
Thank you.
And I want to acknowledge our two new members of council and the effect they've already had on the operation of the city. The satisfaction with the community seems to be continuing to go up because you're here. Oh, there they are. There they are. Over there.
On this side only?
No, only on this side, yes.
Where things are
Mr. Clarke.
Thank you, Your Worship. The next item, item 3, is minutes of the regular council meeting held Monday, June 1st. Recommendation to approve.
Moved by Councillor O'Neill, second by Councillor Marsden. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item 4 is minutes of the Riverview Lands Advisory Committee meeting of Thursday, May 14th. Recommendation to receive.
Moved by Councillor Hodge, second by Councillor Marsden. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Next item, item 5, is minutes of the Arts and Culture Advisory Committee meeting of Thursday, May 14th. Recommendation to receive.
Moved by Councillor O'Neill, second by Councillor Towner. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item 6 is minutes of the Multiculturalism Advisory Committee meeting of Wednesday, May 20th. Recommendation to receive.
The Chair and Vice Chair again. Moved by Councillor Asmussen, second by Councillor O'Neill. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item 7 is minutes of the Sustainability and Environmental Advisory Committee meeting of Tuesday, May 26th. Recommendation to receive.
Moved by Councillor Wilson, second by Councillor Asmussen. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Next item, item 8, is minutes of the Economic Development Advisory Committee meeting of Wednesday, May 27th, and the 2015 Economic Development Advisory Committee Work Plan. The two-part staff recommendations that the minutes of the committee's meeting of Wednesday, May 27th be received, and that Council approve the 2015 Economic Development Advisory Committee Work Plan.
So moved.
Moved by Councillor Marsden, seconded by Councillor. I'm sorry? Thank you. And Councillor O'Neill points out that, and may the minutes reflect, that he was at the meeting even though he's not the Vice Chair. I was at the meeting too, but only for the yeah, okay. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously. Odd that would be our most controversial minutes.
Item 9 is fourth and final reading of Water Distribution Bylaw and Sewer and Drainage Bylaw. The staff recommendations that Council give fourth and final reading to Water Distribution Bylaw 4428, fourth and final reading to Sewer and Drainage Bylaw 4429, fourth and final reading to Bylaw Notice Enforcement Amendment Utilities Bylaw 4474, and fourth and final reading to Municipal Ticket Information Amendment Utilities Bylaw 4483.
Moved by Councillor Asmussen. Second by Councillor Marsden. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Next item, item 10, is a development permit, variance permit authorization for proposed setback variances at 826 Dogwood Street. Prior to reading the staff recommendation, I invite the Mayor to call for speakers.
Are there any speakers to this item? We run a mini public hearing on development variance permits. Are there any speakers to this item? These are typically advertised in the local neighborhood. Are there any speakers to this item? Seeing none, I'll declare that closed. Councillor Reid has some question, I think.
Thank you. Through to planning and development staff. When we put this through the first three readings, did you mention then that they'd be requiring development variance permits, and only for the garages or for the setbacks?
Yes, through your worship to Councillor Reid, yes, it was for the variances, or for the setbacks.
For the setbacks.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Your Worship, if I read the recommendation.
Is there a motion on the floor?
The recommendation from staff is that Council approve the signing and sealing of the development variance permit for 826 Dogwood Street, and that the Mayor and City Clerk be authorized to execute it.
Moved by Councillor Marsden, seconded by Councillor Hodge. All in favor? Opposed? Councillor Asmussen is either late or opposed. Opposed? There we go. Motion carries. Oh, that's right. Okay.
Next item, item 11, is a development variance permit authorization to reduce the minimum separation requirement between a liquor store and a public park at 580 Clarke Road. Prior to reading the staff recommendation, I would invite the Mayor to call for speakers.
Same rules. Are there any speakers to this item? Any speakers at all? Anybody?
Anybody?
Mr.
Just me.
Mr. Violet.
Just me. Don Violet, 640 Clarke Road. This is a third of what the setback is. Coquitlam Park already has its fair share of issues and problems in that park. Fortunately, we've had some good RCMP officers in the past that have taken even the prostitution under scrutiny and gone and dedicated their time to dealing with the issues. We're pushing it on where we can push people in and have them have a place to go drink. This is a third of the distance or less than of what the bylaws say. Coquitlam is tight. We're going to have a lot of people in there, so think before you make a decision like this. That's just what I want to say. Thank you.
Now, you're aware that this proposal is to relocate it from.
We understand it's pretty close right now already,
yeah.
and it does have an impact. But we think that will change. But within a third of the distance, 1/3 of it is pretty close.
Yeah, ask him a question.
Okay, Councillor Reid.
So this will be one of the new models. It will be the store within a store. And do you think that will help at all?
Well, we've also
sort of-
heard comments from the inside entrances that the Lougheed Village has some problems with their inside entrances and the people that use it on those towers. I think it's safer than driving, personally, but when you combine those, we don't know the impact. But
Are they a store within a store, Donna, or are they just wine?
It's a pub, actually, and they off sales,
pub, yeah.
and that's what they do. They off sales through there, so it's a similar environment.
Well, different.
But the problem is the people just hanging out and drinking in the park. There's a lot of empties there, and it's obvious what goes on already. So it may be too late to change the use of that park, but that's the environment it is now.
Okay, thank you.
You.
I have questions for staff.
Go ahead.
So right now, this liquor store exists as a non-conforming use. Is that correct?
Through the chair to Councillor Reid, yes, that is correct. It's 192 meters from Coquitlam Park, and it was there before the 2003 bylaw was enacted by council.
Okay, so if we approve this one, it will still stay non-conforming, correct?
With the approved variance, it would be, yes, it would not be within the 300-meter
Right.
distance that's in the bylaw, but if council chooses to vary that, then it would be
Well, we
varied for
can
this
vary
site.
it, but it will still be non-conforming. I'll tell you where I'm having my problems with all of this now, and I realize we're walking down a new avenue and new rules with the province, and my problem is that in the last month or so, we've had several issues, and they've all come with these little strings attached because we really don't have any finality from the province is exactly to what the final rules are going to be. And so I know that we are sort of waiting until all those rules are finalized so that we can sort of take a rethink, and I'm looking to Mr. McIntyre here, but take a really good look at our rules. Because some of the pubs and beer and wine stores that we have in this city, they had to jump through a lot of hoops to be able to get licensed with us with the rules that we've had before. And now they're all going to be coming forward. I mean, you can just, you don't have to have a very shiny crystal ball to watch this. But they are all going to be coming forward because the game is changing. The whole game board has changed.
I hate to do this. We're still in the public hearing aspect of it.
Yes.
So I wonder if we could go back to the public and ask for any more speakers, and then we can get into the council.
Oh, I'm sorry.
There isn't a motion on the floor yet, and we're still in that phase.
Okay.
That's okay? I'll be right back to you.
Okay.
Are there any other speakers to this item? Are there any other speakers to this item? Third and final time, are there any other speakers to this item? I'll declare it closed. Councillor Reid, do you have anything?
You did close it, but that was really good. So my question is, if we do it now and it's non-conforming, does it automatically then get approved when we change our bylaws and our rules?
Your Worship, in response to Councillor Reid's question,
The dog's breath.
yeah, as Carl was mentioning, the existing beer and wine store on the west side of Clarke Street by the pub, it was in place and in operation before the city made the zoning bylaw changes back in 2003. So it's legal non-conforming, grandparented, if you will. This application, and they were having some challenges with that location. They, in fact, had wanted to look at other opportunities. I know they spoke with staff about that. And they were aware that in moving the store, one of their concerns was, would we be jeopardizing our legal non-conforming status that we had?
Right.
And so they knew going into this full well that through the DVP, the Development Variance Permit process, they could apply for that, and that's what they've done. If this is to be supported by council, this DVP application is to be supported by council, they are again legally non-conforming, but they've been rationalized or legitimized, if you will, by a Development Variance Permit, which in a way is more official and permanent than being grandparented, because it's been done consciously by council. Now, looking ahead, certainly we are working on that. Councillor Reid, there's been a series of reports that staff have brought forward to council over the years as we try to keep pace with the province and their changes to their liquor licensing and regulatory regime. We are working on a report. I'd like to get it to council before the summer break. That's my target. I'm trying. I can't absolutely commit on that, but that's what we're shooting for. And what we'd like to do in that is bring forward for council's consideration, let's go back and revisit some of the aspects the city has in place in our zoning bylaw, and does council want to revisit and perhaps update that? Because certainly the landscape is changing as far as the province of British Columbia is concerned. This application before us tonight is just an example of that. That's one of the changes they've made. It's consistent with our zoning. It doesn't meet the 300-meter separation, so that's the only point of review for the city. So what we'd like to do in that report that is forthcoming is provide council the opportunity. I know when we brought it forward before, there was a number of questions and some direction to staff, like, for example, providing the opportunity for the distilleries and brew pubs and that. So we got that part of it covered as well. So what we'd like to do is bring forward in that report an update to council where we understand the province is at right now in their liquor licensing regulatory changes. some areas of the zoning bylaw that council may want to revisit and update, and some ideas how we can move forward on that. So that's the package we're working on right now.
Okay, then one last question. Under these new rules and regulations, if we move them, they will be in a better position because we will have sort of legitimized it with the development variance. But if there were a lot of problems going on, who pulls the license? Does the city or does the province? If there were just, I mean, I'm trying to, you know, for the community's sake, this is something totally different now, a store within a store. If there happens to be a tremendous amount of problems with this in the parks and all that, who pulls a license, or what would you need to pull a license, or do we do it, or does the province do it?
Yeah. By and large, I would suggest that it's the province that deals on those sides of a liquor establishment operation. As long as they meet the city zoning bylaw, and it's through the DVP process that there's an ability to officially vary that, and as long as they meet our zoning requirements in terms of operating the correct zone and meet their business license requirements, that pretty much covers it off for the city of Coquitlam. It's more their operation in terms of their obligations and requirements for provincial liquor licensing operations.
So it's all up to the province to do it then?
Monetary penalties and all sorts of things.
Did Carl have something to add?
Yes, just briefly. With the licensee retail store terms and conditions, they have quite a thick manual here, and in the back they have a series of contraventions, and they number in over 50 types of, or 46 types of contraventions, each associated with potential suspensions of licenses and also monetary penalties. And if those stack up, I imagine
So that's
further
our only
penalties.
recourse.
Beg your pardon?
That would be our recourse.
This is the province's liquor licensing terms and conditions.
Okay, that's all I need to know. Thank you.
You've added a few people here. Thank you. My own perspective is that given the two locations, I'd rather this location than the other location. Now, it is the case that approving this moves this, cancels the other location effectively and moves it to a new location. Disapproving this leaves it where it is in its current condition. And I've been to the one that we have now. As it's described here, this one produces less challenges for the neighborhood. Whether or not we agree that there is an impact on a park from the sale of beer and wine or liquor in a retail environment, I'm not certain I follow that causal connection as well as that. But even if you accept that, this location is better from staff's perspective, and I think from my perspective, than the one we have now. And I see nodding. I'll stop there. Councillor O'Neill.
Yeah, thank you. Following on that, I do agree. And my general point was that I was going to make, and I will make, is that lacking, so we're sort of in new territory. We don't have a finished map in front of us to help guide us, so we've got to use common sense. And in looking at this, and certainly the staff has gone through and produced quite a good report, I think, on the reasons why staff supports the variances. And every one of those seems to make sense to me. And so, yes, we're in this gray zone. Things are still firming up. But until we have that map, that really solid guide to know exactly where the province is going to land and where we should go, we've just got to use our heads. And I think using our heads will lead us to support this. I do have one question, though, and it's about one variable that we didn't have to consider in the past, and we maybe should be considering now. Does anybody know if anybody's ever looked at the impact of a SkyTrain station near a liquor store? Because there's the new variable coming into this. It's near a park, yeah, could be near a school, we look at that, but how about SkyTrain station? And I don't know, does anybody, I wonder, Mr. Chair, if anyone on the planning and development staff has heard of any studies in this area or knows of any instance of any in-depth research into the impact of a SkyTrain station and a liquor store, if there's any positive or negative correlation.
No. Any other questions? Maybe staff have something.
Your Worship, thank
Mr.
you.
McIntyre.
No, it's a great question. Joseph, through transportation engineering, has heard some factors in play. We haven't. We will go back. I'll pose that question to the group just right in the report. I would point out that the city's separation, minimum separation distances, to parks and schools and places of worship, that dates back to the early 2000s. So I guess a SkyTrain transit station was not part of the thinking at that time as a facility to think about stipulating a separation distance. But we'll have a look at that.
Yeah, thank you. And I don't think it's a big enough issue because there's nothing like jumping off the table right now saying, oh, this would be terrible, so we better put this on hold. I haven't heard of anything, but I'm just wondering, it's sort of a curiosity thing, and maybe it is worth looking at. So thank you for taking that under advisement. And that's all. Thank you.
In fact, I gave it a bit more thought, and at the Granville station, the Granville SkyTrain station is a liquor store in the station. So I'm not sure whether that's for or against, actually. Councillor Hodge.
Okay. Certainly the whole landscape is changing here, and it seems that almost every month now we get a report on something to do with either it's liquor primary or food primary. Food primary is acting like liquor primary. We've had a couple of applications recently. We had one just last month, and I guess one of the challenges that we have is that it is still evolving. It's still changing, and it can continue to change. I note that our bylaws say you can't be within 300 meters of a school, a park, a church. And yet we hear, for example, residents up on Burke Mountain saying that they want to have a pub or a beer and wine store. But when you look at a map and you see where the parks and hopefully someday where schools are going to be, it would be very difficult to put a store in that location without breaking our own bylaws, and thus we would have to go to a variance. So we're seeing more and more of these from a practicality standpoint, if nothing else. So I appreciate that we're looking at these rules. It's challenging that we're making decisions without that report, but we're making these decisions on a regular basis now through the variance process. On this one here, it's already essentially under a variance, albeit that it's grandfathered in something that goes back ahead of time. So I think that's the challenge I have, is that we don't know. Do we have any indication? I guess the other one that comes up is the provincial regulations that you have to be, I believe it's 1,000 meters or a kilometer from a. Maybe you could explain what is that rule? Because that applies just to other stores, or does it apply to liquor primary?
Yes, through your worship, to Councillor Hodge. That applies to licensee liquor stores. Either private liquor stores or government liquor stores have to be a kilometer apart. And in this case, the furthest store is, or the nearest store is further than 1 kilometer away.
So it would remain. But if this store were to stay in this location and the provincial government were to say change that rule, because we know that we're seeing more and more of these stores going, or we will see, into grocery stores, conceivably we could have an application to go into that store if this stayed in its same place across the street and the provincial government were down the road to relax that rule of 1,000 meters, which I suspect it may at some point, given that more and more stores or grocery stores are wanting to have these stores within stores. I'm sorry, I'm asking you to speculate on it, but I'm just sort of saying this could happen. We could end up, if this does not move, it could leave it open for at some point down the road for an application to be in that store.
Through the chair, yeah, it's a little bit speculative to comment, but I would note that, and we've been following the provincial government's liquor licensing changes over the last number of years, some councillors will recall, and that's one thing that they've stood fast by, is the 1 kilometer and a separation from the LRSs, and we understand that's not on the table. Though with some of the new forms that they've introduced, like the wine store within a store, that's not subject to that.
Okay.
But a grocery store can only have a store within store or BC wine on the shelves. It's not both.
Okay.
It's either store within store or wine on shelves.
Right. And if the 1,000 stays in place, then that could block from one being here. But at the end of the day, residents may say, hey, we prefer to have it in our grocery store, and with one across the street they couldn't. So it could work either way. We could end up with two if they change the rule, or we could end up where residents down the road say we'd prefer it in our grocery store, but we can't do it now because this one, if this one stayed across the street. So it could actually work either way.
Again, to the chair, as far as our understanding is that the 1 kilometer separation from the provincial perspective is not on the table for discussion. The other thing they've also been clear about to this point is not creating new LRS licenses, licensee retail stores. So there's a phase now where there may be some shifting around. There's even speculation that people may be buying these licenses in one area of the province and shifting them elsewhere, but it'll all be within the existing universe that's there now, and with that 1 kilometer separation distance.
Right, which is the next thing I was going to mention is, again, although there's no new licenses, it is possible now to move them actually intercity rather than within the city. So, okay, good. Okay, thank you.
Okay, Councillor Wilson.
Just wondering, are we at all concerned that we're placing a liquor store before we've decided where the YMCA might be going?
Through the chair, I guess we didn't specifically consider that in terms of the location relative to planned or discussed facilities in Coquitlam. I guess our thinking, and to point out, we've listed the factors why we would support the development variance permit. I think if you look at Coquitlam, that core area, let's call it an urban village, and it's an evolving, changing urban village. And one of the landmarks, one of the anchors is going to be that Safeway development at the end there. Having a modern beer and wine store in that location as part of that complex, I think from a city planning perspective would make some sense. It is what creates that urban village in terms of the range of services and supplies. I don't think the YMCA would be right at that location, and again, so it's a matter of some separation distance. But it's those businesses and operations that go into creating that core. It's that you have that range of services, that vibrancy, that it's an activity center.
No, I get it. But if we thought at one point it was important to be 300 meters away from a rec center, and we haven't decided where we're putting the rec center yet, I just want to follow up
just on a clarification. So in other words, does the 300 meters apply to both? Does it apply as a prohibition to a rec center locating within 300 meters of a liquor store? Is that part of your question?
No. I'm just saying.
Sorry. Okay.
We're are we putting the cart before the horse kind of thing?
Okay.
Councillor Reid asked the question about repercussions, like if we were having problems with this location, and so. Assuming that the liquor store sells the alcohol according to the rules, they don't break any rules, but all of a sudden we have huge problems with too much drinking in the park, for example. Other than us trying to enforce our bylaws, there's nothing that the city could do to pull the license, like Councillor Reid was asking. As long as they're following all the rules, it's just up to us to deal with the consequences. Is that correct?
Again, through the chair, in terms of the operation of the LRS, it's subject to quite a lengthy list of terms and conditions set by the provincial government. Again, it's a little speculative, but if there was new problems to pop up or emerge in that neighborhood around drinking, say in the park, I imagine it'd be something the RCMP would become aware of. There'd likely be coordination between the RCMP and maybe bylaw enforcement and looking at the licensing aspect of that. I would think, this isn't my area of specialty, but if there's a problem that's emerging, it's traced back to that particular store, I would think there would be communication with the liquor licensing branch just to make them aware of it. And if there's something's happening that's contributing to a problem in the community, I imagine it'd be all the players that get together to deal with it.
I'm not assuming that there is going to be a problem, because there isn't a problem now with the current location, but I'm just trying to get my head around, this is closer to the park, and, assuming that the store is doing everything they're supposed to do, they're not breaking any of their guidelines. I was just curious, so that's fine. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Asmussen.
Yes, a couple of things when I look at this. The store there, I think, is Mr. Johansson pointed out that either we're going to have a liquor store or you can have wine on the shelf, but there will be liquor in this location. And I think one of the avenues is that if you're going to have liquor, because they can put wine on the shelf within the grocery store. So my issue is that you have a store within a store and the entrance is within the store and the alcohol is better managed, better contained, but alcohol can be sold out of there either way from that store, if I'm not correct. Mr. Johansson, that's correct?
That's correct. Sorry, through your worship to Councillor Asmussen. Yes, that is correct. In either model, there's stipulations, again, in the terms and conditions that are mandated by the Liquor Control Board about how the sales are managed through separate identifiable tills that have 19 or older cashiers, and they're trained in serving it right. And of course, the store within store has full walls, and the entrances are controlled by the tills. And there's also going to be, I understand, security with the Safeway grocery store as well.
That's good to know. Thank you. The other issue comes down to about alcohol in the park. I live close to an elementary school, close to a park, not close to any liquor store, kilometers away for a liquor store. We had kids drinking in the school. We had kids drinking in the park. I don't think the close proximity is much of a difference if kids are going to drink in a park. We just had an example from Councillor Towner earlier today up at Charles Best. Kids have been drinking up in the corner, glass all broken, everything up there. That's a long way from a liquor store. So I appreciate Mr. Violet and their concern, their issues, and I hope, like all of us that live around parks and schools, that these issues happen with kids getting access to alcohol, being underage. That does happen. So to me, that's not the deciding point on this. The other question is, though, and so we got an existing liquor store, and I think this location is better. But if where the existing liquor store were to be redeveloped, and would that liquor store be allowed to be grandfathered within the redevelopment of that new building as a commercial enterprise?
Through your worship to Councillor Asmussen, because this is an application to relocate the license for licensee retail store, if approved by council and they go through with the lease, it gets moved to the Safeway, and that license moves with the business.
Not just that, I'm just saying, forget about this application, the movement license. If the license wasn't there, there's a liquor store existing on that site, and it's grandfathered because it was within 300 meters of the park, and the area for Mr. McIntyre was redeveloped, and they wish to stay in that location, would that allow a liquor store again in that location? Forget about this part of it.
So if we reject this, subsequently that site is redeveloped.
Mr. McIntyre.
Can it contain
that existing license, grandfathered alcohol liquor outlet?
If an existing legally non-conforming business operation discontinues for more than, I believe it's 6 months, it loses its non-conforming status. You can't have a business that operates there close down for greater than 6 months and then come back and claim grandparented status.
That was the question.
And that would be then I'd be well past the lapse of a time of site redevelopment.
Okay. Well, I think in this area is going to be densifying. I think eyes within the neighborhood will help protect within that park as we develop and densify with that area. And I think it was mentioned by the proponent here that people would rather be walking towards a store close by to the high-density area than driving somewhere else and going to this area. So I think this is an improvement on it, and I think the other point I have is that whether it's a store controlled within the store, of a full liquor store, or you're going to have wine within the store, you're going to have alcohol within a store. So I think this is just a better way of dealing with it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Marsden.
Thank you. Just to clarify, is the motion on the floor as yet?
No.
No.
Is it appropriate to move it?
It is.
I shall move the motion.
Well, wait a moment then, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. The staff recommendations that Council approve the signing and sitting of the development variance permit for 580 Clarke Road and that the Mayor and City Clerk be authorized to execute it.
Second.
Moved by Councillor Marsden, second by Councillor Asmundson.
And I'll speak to it.
Go ahead.
I think what we've got is a significantly changing community. We've got a significantly changing industry. The industry is one that is perhaps one of the most highly regulated, and with some of the stiffest penalties for nonconformists. So I'm comfortable that those pieces are in place. We've got a situation with the change in the community with looking to try and support a business. We had something come forward to us just last week with regards to supporting a zoning change for a business that was a long time in that area, in this specific area, and we wanted to give them a zoning that enabled them to continue to operate. As we've just heard, that as this redevelops, if this store closes its doors for more than 6 months, it has to find a new place, and there isn't anything in the area. So this is an area in which we can look and say, let's start to support the businesses that are in the area, that have been in the area for a long time, and that, as we've seen in Burke Mountain, the residents actually want to have. They want to have these options available. It is changing. It is a new setup with having it in the grocery stores, but I think it's the proper thing for us to enable a long-standing business to continue to operate and enable us to move forward from a redevelopment perspective. We're going to see this area continue to redevelop, and I think we need to support that and enable them to move forward. So, to Mr. Violet's concerns, I think they're extremely valid. I take heart and come to this decision with the fact that we've got some tremendous communication from our new officer in charge with the RCMP with regards to some ideas he's got with regards to foot patrols and some initiatives that he's looking to institute, that if we do see a concern, I'm comfortable that we'll see the guys and girls in the blue suits and yellow stripes. They're going to be out there in the park and making sure they clean it up. I'm quite comfortable with that, so I will support this motion moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hodge.
Yes, I'm going to support it as well for many of the same reasons. I think that we recognize that we're going to have to make some adjustments to our laws, our bylaws, as the provincial government continues to make changes to theirs. I think that there's certainly there are some valid concerns, but as Councillor Asmundson mentioned earlier during the question part of this, is that there are a number of areas where we're seeing kids, on school grounds at night or out in parks and things, and that's happening now, regardless of where the alcohol is. And I think that we just have to rely on the provincial government and regulators to make sure that liquor is handled properly. And in regards to this particular park, with the new superintendent, we've already had discussions about beefed up enforcement. We've increased we've authorized in the budget for the hiring of more police officers, and we're told that one of the things that we're going to do is see more patrols in the areas when these SkyTrains open, the SkyTrain stations open in the future. So in actual fact, this could be one of the parks that it sees extra patrols anyway for a number of reasons. So I think that in the case of this particular park, I'm sure that we're going to see a lot of extra attention paid to it just because it's near a SkyTrain station. So I'm comfortable on that part of the process, and I think that we run the risk of losing a long-time business due to a number of other forces, including the fact that there's redevelopment taking place in the area, and we're seeing that with a couple of other businesses that are seeking to stay within this part of the community, even though that there's redevelopment happening there. And I think that we have to work with our business community to try to accommodate businesses, both new businesses coming into the area, but also recognizing support for our long-term businesses as well. So I'm going to be supporting this. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Towner.
Oh, thank you. I will be supporting this as well. And like I said last week, and I'll repeat myself, I think the 2003 bylaw regarding the locations of our retail liquor locations must be looked at. Times are changing. Our neighborhoods are changing. I think this is a good use of land, the updated urban village, the convenience with grabbing your groceries and picking up a bottle of wine and being able to walk there. It's going to be a huge increase in the population in that neighborhood, so that makes sense to me. And from reading the report, it sounds like this location is going to be more secure and it's going to be oriented away from the park. It doesn't add an additional retailer of liquor in that neighborhood. It's just a move. And the one that's there now is already close to a park. And we've approved 4 other liquor retailers in the city within the 300 meters of parks, and I'm not aware of any issues with those. And I was also going to bring up the fact that there was a ton of broken glass and a big mess at Charles Best this weekend from partiers, and Charles Best is nowhere near, well, it's near a liquor store at Como Lake Village, I guess. People are going to drink in parks. Where there's a will, there's a way. So anyways, this looks like a good plan, and I'm in support of it.
I'll agree on that, on Councillor Towner's point about that we've got to revisit this thing. I don't know the relationship between churches and liquor stores. I don't know the relationship between parks and liquor stores. I think the one between schools and liquor stores is a bit tenuous, and so I think times are changing enough. The province has created a regulatory, has created they're both here. The province has created a challenge for us because we're trying to adapt to the quickly evolving regulatory framework for liquor retailing. I think the retailing of liquor will mature to the point, or is maturing rather, where we were perhaps backward, and now we're getting to the point where we're not going to be where, say, Europe is in its the maturity of its the way in which it respects liquor. But I think we can move forward a little bit, and this is, by all accounts, moving from a bad location or a location that has challenges to a location that's exactly the same distance from the park as the crow walks, not as the crow flies, but as the crow walks. And so to me, this is a slam dunk. I'm supporting the proposal. Councillor Reid.
I will be supporting it. I have to say that there are liquor licenses being sold in the province, and people can pick up those liquor licenses and move them into this area. So the fact that they're not giving out any more licenses is one fact, but the fact that licenses can move in that have already been purchased is another. So we could end up with more stores. Many years ago, when we did the rules, at that time you would have understood why we put them in, because it was quite the plethora of people coming forward to put licenses in, and we could have had, like, every second store could have been a liquor store. So we had a reason for doing that. The reason I'm so cautious about all of this is because we're right in the middle of the game. It's like a game of Monopoly. We make this rule, the province makes this rule, and it keeps going. And I just don't want to see us caught in any unintended circumstances. So I think we're being cautious, we're being careful, and I think that's the way we have to go forward. But I like this. I like the store. It's going to look nice.
Thank you. The motion's on the floor to approve signing and sealing a development variance permit. All in favor? Opposed? After much debate, we're unanimous in favor of that.
Next item 12, is fourth and final reading to rezoning amendment bylaw number 4550 and development permit authorization for 515 Austin Avenue. Staff recommendations that Council give fourth and final reading to save Coquitlam zoning amendment bylaw number 4550 and approve the signing and sealing of the DP for 515 Austin Avenue, and that the Mayor and City Clerk be authorized to execute it.
Microphone. There we go. Moved by Councillor O'Neill, second by Councillor Asmussen. Councillor Reid.
Thank you. Through to staff, on attachment 8A, I gather since the last time, since third reading, we were talking about all the improvements that he's doing, the colored architectural elements, ceramic, and I was so excited to see that there were going to be some curved balconies or something. What attachment do they show on?
Yes, through your worship to Councillor Reid, if you take a look at attachment 8, it shows the southwest balconies from the street view there with the curve towards the apex of the balconies. You also have the applicant in the audience today as well with the architect, if you want to hear from them as well.
They don't look curved to me.
The face that's in shadow actually curves.
Yes, it's if you look at the west face,
concave.
Yeah, there's a curve that comes from the west line as it curves out towards the southwest. Similar
Obviously,
to the M3.
I look at those curves and then I look at other curves, and these are not curves. Okay.
I appreciate the curve too.
You appreciate
subtle
the
curves.
curve. I'm glad to hear that.
Please, order. We don't need to discuss the quality of various levels of curve, Venus.
Thank you.
Was there anything else, Councillor Reid?
No, I want to thank the architect for doing some of these changes. I think it was really nice to see some of the things that he's doing. And I will tell you, ladies and gentlemen, when I'm out and around in this community, and there was one in the paper just the other day, I don't want to see any more square high-rises. I want some pizzazz out here, or don't bother building. And I keep saying that. I didn't approve this. I see that he has gone and done some work. I will approve it now for fourth reading. But please don't bring us anything that isn't round, wild, has spaceships on top. That, you know, let's get some pizzazz into this community. I'm tired of square. Thank you. I know you don't like it.
Well, and I will add a wrinkle to that. Please don't bring us anything with spaceships on top. Councillor Wilson.
My question's a little more mundane.
Raider?
There's reference made in the report to if the intersection at Austin and Whiting Way gets too busy, there'd be modifications to the intersection that would be studied or looked at. I guess I'm just wondering what might those modifications be if the traffic is too heavy there.
Through your worship to Councillor Wilson, indeed this issue came up at a previous meeting, and I took it back to our transportation planning staff. The advice we received and we share with development services is that in looking at the known priorities, transportation-related priorities in Coquitlam at this point in time, and taking into account that the currently existing traffic patterns on Whiting Way and as such at the intersection of Austin and Whiting Way is deeply influenced by the Evergreen Line construction. And as such, while we keep this thought alive, we recommend at this point that let's wait until the Evergreen Line construction is completed. Then we will have a better opportunity to look at the true traffic impacts and look at whether and what kind of modifications, improvements should take place at this particular intersection. The traffic modeling we've been talking about for probably a couple of months at least indicates that with the forecasted traffic volumes, the major intersections in this vicinity will operate at an acceptable level of service. But again, we recommend to wait until the Evergreen Line construction and its traffic impact is done.
Now, is it fair to say, though, that most of the traffic along North Road or most of the construction along North Road has been pretty much finished? Most of the road work's been finished for the last 3 or 4 weeks?
Well, perhaps, yes. I'm a little hesitant to give a straightforward yes to this answer because just recently, last Thursday, I learned about some issues which might trigger some pavement repairs of significant magnitude at some of the intersections along North Road, so that will have a traffic impact. But also the above head works have not been completed, so there could be some impacts on North Road because of that. But most importantly, when we have a very substantial project like this, when traffic reroutes, it takes a little bit of time before they settle again. So as of today, it would be premature to say that we can see the ultimate conditions.
So that makes sense. But we have the other tower that came to us a few weeks ago on North Road. There's another vacant lot just south of that tower, or that proposed tower. You know, in that lower part of Whiting Way, there could be 4 or 5 new towers. So I'm just wondering, you know, if we approve 2 or 3 of these, and all of a sudden there's a lot too much traffic. What kind of improvements are we going to do, and who pays for those improvements if the towers are already built?
With respect to the other existing applications, transportation planning looked at it, and their general opinion is that some of the transportation or traffic problems we observe at some of the intersections in that vicinity is in part the result of too long blocks and not enough penetration of roadways. And with the new application just north of Austin, what you mentioned, actually, I believe on one of the attachments it's shown, it proposes a new road connection, and transportation planning as part of the Coquitlam Lougheed neighborhood planning process. They are looking at some further other additional improvements into the network in this area so that the block lengths would be shorter, and that will provide for a better distribution of the traffic demand.
Those east-west roads, though, those would be mostly right-in, right-out roads, correct?
That is correct, yes.
Right, so it's okay if you're going towards Port Moody or maybe north to Burnaby, but if you have to go into Vancouver, if you're going, anywhere other than north or west, I just worry that those right-in, right-out roads may not actually take a ton of traffic.
Well, definitely, it's like any other cases. It's a typical case of balancing where for those intersections which currently and in the future will provide for all movements, those who primarily want to make left in, left out may move to a more convenient intersection where there's going to be lesser traffic volume, perhaps no signal, and so on and so forth. So it's rebalancing.
And if I may add, there will be a few full service intersections like Cochrane and Foster. And as development proceeds along North Road between North and Whiting, there may be other opportunities for those road connections where you could get a full intersection as well. So it's something that we're keeping in mind with transportation planning.
Okay. And then just my last question, which wasn't answered earlier, if intersection improvements need to be made after the fact, who pays for those?
I think in a general sense, as development proceeds, if there's improvements that are required to the network, that as part of the development, there'd be a contribution by that development to improve the network, I think, at a high level.
So if the fourth tower that gets approved, at that point we decide, oh, geez, we have to widen the road at Whiting Way, the developer who's building the fourth tower has to pay? Is that what you're saying, or am I confused?
I think I'm saying at a high level. I'm not specifically looking at or referring to Whiting Way in Austin. Again, you have to look at the pattern of potential development as it proceeds along north, and there may be the opportunity to get those road connections that could relieve some of the pressure on that intersection. And as the neighborhood evolves over time, there may be other roads that can happen. But that's at a high level. I see on either side of me there might be more specific answers. There may be some things you could do with signal timing and that sort of thing as well.
We're just adding a ton of density right in that area, and anyways, okay, you guys are smarter than me. I'll leave it at that.
Yep. Let the minutes reflect that staff were smarter than council. Councillor Asmussen.
Well, thank you, and I want to go on about what the architect on this and taking our advice. I was along with Councillor Reid, and I have probably been on this topic for a long time, wanting more iconic-looking high-rises in our town centre, in our city too. It's the skyline, it's the shape, it's what our city's going to look like. Maybe the message isn't getting through enough planning department to make sure that they come with more iconic looking buildings. There are ways, I pointed out years ago, the wave in Surrey, where it's a square, but the balconies are curved, it gives a different shape, there's different things. So I'm glad that he took our comments, went away, and did make some changes. I think the stonework on the road where they put on that area, the color on some of those things, the wood soffits, the roof, I think there's been some nice additions to bring this design together. So that I'm pleased with. Coming to transportation, in the report it says that our network capacity, both existing and planned, to accommodate additional traffic for this development. So the capacity is there. I would also like to point out, and since I drive that area, that Cochrane Avenue is now a full lighted intersection. So we have Austin. Cochrane was never a full lighted, it now is. So you've got an exit at Cochrane. You're getting potentially a right in, right out. The one question that I think I would like to see, and I haven't gotten it clear, but hopefully it's on the Burquitlam Lougheed neighborhood plan, what I think should be done next would be the extension of Cameron through to Whiting Way as a full lighted intersection. That would give you Austin, Cochrane, Cameron, Foster, for all that development then to come out and exit onto North Road north or south along that way. So I don't know if that's within the Burquitlam Lougheed, but I would hope that that would be in your transportation planning and studies since it's already a T intersection with a full signalized, to open it up to Whiting would give a greater benefit for traffic, even going in behind there across the other ways out. So I hope you'll consider that. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I've still got some of my concerns haven't been addressed, but I'm looking at staff report on page 4, bullets 1, 3, and 5. Bullet 1, we see curved balconies on the southwest and southeast corner of the building, and yet I can't see them on the southeast. They don't show up on any of the building elevations, or on. There is no typical floor plan. I don't know. Typically at DP we have a typical floor plate. Is there any document that shows the balconies on a typical floor? Yeah, but it only shows it in perspective, and I'd rather see it in plan view. Okay, I'll set that aside for now. The third bullet says colored vertical feature on element on west elevation, so I flipped to attachment 5A, which is the first of those two drawings, is the west elevation, which is the most boring of the four elevations and doesn't have any colored vertical anything on it. So I don't know what they mean by the colored vertical.
This one here.
That's the south elevation.
Yes.
So is it, but the staff report says the colored vertical feature is on the west elevation. Mr. Oh, whoa, okay. But it's not in the elevation. It's not in the elevation. It's not in the drawing that's marked elevation. I'd rather not receive that from someone else. I'd rather receive it from staff. Obviously, we're still at fourth reading.
Okay. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
The color element is, if you look at attachment 8, if you look at the southwest balcony, and if you head north along the balcony edge, it's the orange column. It's like a concrete slab that's oriented east-west that has the orange color there.
Oh, I see it. So it's not on the west elevation. It's on the west face of the building. It doesn't show on the elevation at all.
Yeah, the long side's on the south elevation, yes. Should have been more accurate with that.
Okay. And it's the fifth bullet says wood soffits at the roof with inset accent lighting. Way up there?
Yes, if you look at the very top on attachment 8, yes, there's the wood soffits there and accent lighting.
Wow.
It'll help with the tower being accentuated at night, yeah, as you walk by or drive by.
That's a 3-story tall light bulb changer. Okay, and my last comment or question or concern, it's not there now. So I'm looking at it, I'm approaching it from the south elevation, or from the south face. I'm on the sidewalk on Austin in a wheelchair. Let's look at 8C, at attachment 8. And it's the same doesn't show up in plan view either. So if I look at attachment 6, I don't see a ramp. I don't see how a person with disabilities gets to the front door.
Yes, through your worship, there's 2 entrances. So one off Austin through stairs, but on Whiting there's also a main entrance there that it allows for accessible ability to get from the sidewalk into the entrance and also in the underground parking garage. There's accessible spots there that allow for access into the building as well.
So there isn't access to Austin without stairs?
That's correct.
There's the only, okay. Mr. McIntyre.
Yes, Your Worship. A really good point. And it is unfortunate. I guess it's one of the factors or the challenges with the site grading, the differential between Whiting and Austin. And I know there was a pedestrian connection that's goes through from Austin up to Whiting, and it relies on a series of stairways to make up the grade difference. I think there was some ramping put in to allow for bikes to be moved up and down, but unfortunately not for people in wheelchairs. And also there's a secondary, more controlled access to the facility itself off of Austin. The challenge there is not only the grade of the site, but also because of the underbuilding parkade. In fact, in that area extends above the grade level. It's sort of you're compounding, if you will, that grade difference by having essentially a wall along that south flank of the building that encapsulates the parkade. So there is some obstacles there. As Carl points out, there is the full access and accessibility from the north side from Whiting.
Okay. So I thank Councillor Asmundson for pointing out attachment 12 shows it in section, and my colleagues can see the realities that a person in a scooter or in a chair coming from the SkyTrain station, say, or from North Road to an address that they know of as 515 Austin, because that's printed really, really big on the side of the building. It is the marketing of the building. The building is 515 Austin, and they'll get to the front door, and there's 12 risers or something.
No, there's the main door further down.
The main door is out, the accessible door is at back. There is no accessible door on Austin. The building address is on Austin. The building faces Austin. The building's marketing is 515 Austin. And persons in wheelchairs can go to the back of the building to get in. And it makes me uncomfortable when we do that.
Should they do a ramp coming up here?
Well, I would have hoped, but you look at the topography. The attachment 12 shows the challenges. You've got some parkade issues and in a garden. I assume that the garden, you'd sacrifice a whole bunch of landscaping to get a ramp in there, but at the same time, folks that go shopping at Extra Foods, which is something else now, down at Caribou, are going to come up with their shopping carts, because they always steal those, and then they're going to be stuck leaving them on the front street and carrying their. I mean, I'm not certain. If you're with a walker, how do you get in the building? You go around back, and it's a long way to walk to get into the building. We should never make it way more inconvenient to be in a wheelchair. So I'm struggling with this one.
Your Worship, if I could, point taken, excellent, excellent comments.
Attachment 6 goes to Whiting. It doesn't go to Austin. It doesn't go to Austin.
Yeah. We'll certainly pay close attention to that in the future. There may be other opportunities with the parcels immediately to the west and north as they develop through there. Maybe it'll be a more comprehensive development with the opportunity for a continuous ramping from that corner up to Whiting Way, which actually might meet a broader neighborhood need as well, not just for this project here, but for the neighborhood to the north on Whiting Way, because right now they have to go sort of the long way around, if you will. So having a better connection through there. And so I take your point about that sort of, in effect, having a barrier along the south side. Again, with this project, though, they've really, the formal entrance, the design and formal entrance to the building is off of Whiting, but they want to tap into, I think, the Austin Avenue addressing. So there still is the ability to get in quite safely and conveniently off of Whiting Way.
Okay. But if you're on Austin, it's 300 meters or 400 meters to get into the building in a chair, and it doesn't cut it for me. Anybody else? No. Motion is fourth and final reading and a development permit. All in favor? Opposed? I'm opposed. I'm alone. All of the motion carries.
Next item, item 13, concerns the European Chafer Outreach and Education Strategy and Bylaw Amendment related to Water Shortage Response Plan Bylaw number 3701. Staff recommendations that Council give first, second, and third readings to Water Shortage Response Plan Amendment Nematodes Bylaw number 4567.
Moved by Councillor O'Neill, second by Councillor Asmundson. All in favor? Opposed? Carries unanimously.
Next item, item 14, concerns the Strategic Investment Advisory Panel, outstanding advisory panel members' approvals. Staff recommendations that Council approve the proposed advisory panel members for the Strategic Investment Advisory Panel as set out in Attachment 1 to the report.
Second. Moved by Councillor Asmundson, second by Councillor Marsden. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries with our thanks.
Your Worship, that's the last formal item on this agenda.
They're in no hurry.
I would ask members of council to move a motion to adjourn.
Moved by Councillor Towner, second by Councillor Asmussen, to adjourn. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously. Are there any questions on tonight's agenda from members of the audience? Mr. Violet.
Good evening. Thank you all for supporting the European Chafer amendment to the bylaw there for watering. It is a serious problem, and my question to you is, what do you think about a $350 fine for somebody advertising and using a very serious chemical in the city of Coquitlam called Arena? And he charges a minimum of $400 to $450 per application. And you've made an amendment, you made a bylaw of stopping it happening, but the loophole is he can advertise, and he has, to 30,000 homes. What can we do to stop this from happening? The province has a stop advertising law that says it's a $200,000 fine, but the damage is done at that point. He doesn't care. Your environmental services officers do the best they can, but to track him down, secure the evidence, chain of custody is very difficult. Our MLA in the room tonight is the one who actually introduced it and got it going, and we thank her for that. But we also want to know where the loopholes are, and if we can have a strategy to stop those loopholes. Because somebody that advertises to use the chemical Arena, which kills bees and everything around for 6 months, is not a good thing for Coquitlam. So can we get a strategy, my question to you is, to try to find out ways to stop this?
Okay.
And from happening.
Well, I thank you very much for the question, and I'm glad that the critic for local government is actually in the room, largely because this would all be resolved if this were an order of government, if local government were an order of government. Right now, we get to do exactly what the province tells us we're allowed to do, and what federal government tells us we're allowed to do on other elements. We don't get to do anything else, and we certainly don't get to affect freedom of speech, taking out ads. Those kinds of things are not something we can regulate by bylaw. For example, people that take out ads that say they're selling a home that has 4 suites in it. We can't prevent them from taking out an ad that clearly just demonstrates something that doesn't meet our zoning bylaw, but we're not allowed to prohibit the ad. We can then use that to go after that person for. So it is a challenge that we face in lots of different fronts. There is a person in this room that actually introduced originally the idea of a pesticide ban in a cosmetic pesticide ban in Coquitlam, and unfortunately our ability to enforce that is limited by the powers that we haven't been granted by provincial government.
Even Rona selling chemicals actively in our city today, pesticides.
Yeah, and we can't ban the sale of a legal product within our boundaries. We can only ban its use.
It is. It's another
only ban its use in the limited circumstances because the courts have allowed us to ban the use of a cosmetic pesticide for a bunch of municipal reasons. But there's other products that we can't ban their use in Coquitlam.
It's frustrating to see that you can make a bylaw that can't be enforced, and it comes down to hopefully chemicals like diazonine that will not even be produced in North America anymore. For the past 5 years, it's stopped that chemical. So we're hoping, yes, correct, that we can go up to the levels necessary to enforce our clean environment.
Thank you very much. And that was barely on tonight's agenda, but I let it happen.
It was. European Chafer.
Yeah,
Absolutely it is.
Yep. That's good.
Good. Thank you.
Thank you. Do you have a question? Okay, sorry. Councillor Wilson on that.
Thanks. Is our engineering department aware of this business?
They've worked with us to correct it. However, that's what I'm saying. We're frustrated at the loopholes. Even an 80-year-old woman wants to have them come in and prove it. She says, fine, use my property, and I don't want to put her in harm's way. But that's basically, and now the provincial environmental service officer is involved and looking to see if we can, most likely, and it could even be fraud. The fella has no license to spray at all, even Roundup. But so they're more interested in where he's getting it from. And that's what we need to focus upon because it is being supplied. The chemicals companies I know won't even sell the product, is how bad it is. Won't even sell it.
And so if we were to take away his business license, he would still be doing this, I'm assuming.
But he doesn't have a license to spray, so where is he buying it from anyway? That's what they would like to know, if he's in fact spreading that product. That's what they don't know, but he's guaranteeing it for 6 months and charging $400 and $450, and it went out to 30,000 homes, and he's told your environmental services officer, so what? Catch me. And we know that there's a possibility the chemical's being used.
So what do we do in a case like that when we find somebody who doesn't have a business license? At least we have a small fine, but our municipal ticket amount is $1,000?
$350.
Is that our max?
No, we could increase it within limits, but...
And the provincial government did go after him, say cease and desist in 24 hours, all the advertisement comes off your website, or $200,000 fine. So he did, but the people call the next day or 2 weeks later and say, can I get it done? Oh yeah, we'll be there tomorrow. That's where we are with this. So we're looking for reasons and hope you can explore a strategy.
I would suggest you give him a call and ask for his service.
That's what this woman has done. He's offered it. And now the provincial environmental service officer is interested in following up. I don't necessarily want to put an 80-year-old woman in harm's way of that nature and have him get angry at her. But that's correct. Anybody can do it.
No, I get it.
I'm willing to offer my yard.
Pardon me?
I'm willing to offer my yard.
Well, that's the thing. It's $400 for the treatment. And I think we could get enough proof. Either it's fraud, and he's frauding all these people, or it's using a harmful chemical. Provincial service officer says he may be just spreading lime and just bilking the public, and there's nothing they can do. But what they except for fraud. But what they really want to catch is the person who's selling Arena here, because they know they are. They want to catch them selling it to unlicensed people. That's where the problem probably lies. But it is a tough one, and please, and thank you for doing the nematode, because he's telling people it doesn't work. I believe it works. I noticed that I was in New Westminster in 2001 when it came. 23 grub and 1 shovelful. That's dramatic. And that's why you have 4 times the population of raccoons and skunks right now. So now we're getting more calls to your animal services bylaw, injured animals, fights, cats, etc. And they're territorial. So there's only so much space for them. But thank you for your start on the issue.
Well, thank you very much. It does demonstrate quite illustratively the limits of our powers as a municipality, and the fact that we could probably function a lot better if we were an order of government. Thank you. Anybody else? Any other speakers to this item? Any other speakers to this item? Any other questions from the audience? Any other questions? Come on, there's got to be a question.
Good night.
Thank you all for coming.